March 30, 2025. After breakfast at the Samyae Resort, I played with their pet doggie for a while and then we started at 8:30 am on our way to the Bumthang Palace or Wangduechhoeling Palace. Dog mom. Hey dog mom. Doggie Wangchuk. Doggie Wangchuk. This was not there on our itinerary, But we overheard a group of tourists mentioning about it the previous night during dinner, and Meena wanted to see it. It took Sangay just over 10 minutes to cover the distance, but the usual entrance gate to the palace was closed. Being a Sunday, the palace was closed for visitors. Sangay then took another route and reached a point from where we took a short walk to reach the palace complex. This palace built by Wangduechhoeling, the father of the Bhutan's first king in the 19th century, sprawls over a vast land with greenery and a temple within the complex, and it overlooks the Bumthang airport. It also houses an ancient museum within the compound.
Jigminam girl. In the year 1881, he was coming from Punakha to Thimphu. In the palace where I sit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi planted trees and gave a speech. So Jigminam girl, he...
So the airport is here only?
Yes, sir. It's just opposite to the airport.
Okay.
But since this Sunday today, I'm not very sure whether they will open or not.
Sunday, yeah, it is not open. No, Sunday is closed.
But you can have a look around. You can.
We spent some time admiring the beauty of the palace and then started on our journey towards Phobjikha Valley.
ये नहीं बोला, कल ही बोला ना मैं, हो सके तो देखते हैं, नहीं तो नहीं.
मैडम ज़्यादा ये साइड सीन नहीं देखते ना. मैडम का मिस हो जाने से मैडम
उनको ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट है पार्क, ये सभी है ना, गार्डन पार्क,
हाँ
ऐसा सभी इंटरेस्ट है.
वो म्यूजियम वगैरह पास में है सर.
हाँ,
मैडम को उधर ले चलते हैं ना.
ओके.
वो उधर 7 स्टोरेज म्यूजियम है.
अच्छा अच्छा, तो 7 स्टोरेज मतलब मैडम को मुश्किल हो जाएगा ऊपर नीचे जाने में.
ज़्यादा ऐसे नहीं चलना
हाँ.
पड़ेगा. हमारा धीरे धीरे चलते हैं.
We reached the cluster of 108 white flags seen on our way to Bumthang 2 days ago. Sonam explained everything about it in detail as promised.
So this one is prayer flag. Okay. So this one originally started from Nepal. Okay. And here in Bhutan we generally use 5 different colors: white, yellow, red, green, and blue. So white one is to white of all your negativities and bring in positivities.
Okay.
We call it as benign here.
Okay.
And yellow one is for longevity. Okay. So they have a long life in love, which is the yellow one. Then red one is for love. We call it as Bumthang. Then green and blue is for like grateful means seeking protection from local deities, bringing them under our control, and even some enemies. And yes, if you happen to see a group of white flags like this one, okay, so this one is generally for the deceased ones who have passed away. So we should hoist 108 prayer flags for them. So generally we hoist prayer flags vertically like this on the prayer pole. So if you take a look at the top of the prayer flag, okay, there is a dagger and a stick there. So this dagger symbolizes god of wisdom, Wangduechhoeling, and the stick represents the will of Dharma. And normally we remove the cover of this pole in order to symbolize Avalokiteshvara, the god of compassion. And the base of the pole is always kept thicker, which symbolizes Vajrapani, the god of power. That's all about this prayer flag.
Okay. So let's go there.
Yes. So and when people passes away, they hoist 108 prayer flags. Then we perform ritual for 49 days. And these prayer flags will contain the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, since he promised to like empty all the hell and guide us. Mantra of Avalokiteshvara, which says Om Mani Padme Hum.
So the top of the pole is the dagger, right?
Yes, the dagger.
Okay.
God of wisdom.
Okay.
Then will of Dharma.
Okay.
Then we remove the cover and make it appear white. And white symbolizes purity here.
Okay.
And it can also represent Avalokiteshvara.
Okay.
And base is always kept thicker,
Okay.
which symbolizes God of power.
Okay.
Yes.
So these are totally 108 flags.
Yes.
So it is symbolic for one deceased person,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay.
Yes.
For each person they are erecting 108.
Yes. So
Not for one family.
No, for each person. So 108 in Hinduism also is auspicious
Okay.
number. Here in our country also is auspicious.
So the cost is borne by the family itself.
Yes.
Okay. After
Yes.
deceased.
Yes.
Okay.
Here when people are giving birth and when people are marrying, the expenditure is not that much.
Okay.
But when people passes away,
Ah.
the expenditure is
Oh, okay,
very
okay,
expensive.
okay.
because we have to perform ritual for 49 days.
Ah,
We have to pay for all the monks who have
yes,
came for rituals.
yes.
Then even for all the people who have come to help.
Okay.
So we have to provide them food, some sleeping places.
Ah.
From morning till next morning, we
Okay.
have to provide them tea, alcohol for guarding the body.
Body.
Until the next, until the cremation day.
Final cremation.
Cremation day. Yes.
So,
So I'll just
these are the,
smoke and come back.
okay, these are the flags, and you can see there are actually about 108 flags here, all ruffling in the wind. This is very typical of Bhutan, and he says it was adapted from Nepali culture.
Prayer flags on a mountain ridge, on a bridge,
Hmm.
on a river bank,
Hmm.
and around your houses where there is wind.
Okay.
So when the wind blows,
Ah,
it ruffles this prayer flag and it helps
okay.
to chant the mantra.
Okay.
So whoever comes in contact with this mantra gains some merits
Ah,
and even clear their defilements and
Okay.
bring in positivities.
okay.
Even animals, those when we hoist a prayer flag on the river bank,
Hmm.
so those animals in the fish, I mean in the river,
Ah,
fishes and all,
Huh.
they also gain some merits from this.
okay. Okay. So they have to pay for the land to the
No, sir.
government. No.
No land, but we have to ask permission from the forest department
Okay.
to cut down these prayer poles.
Okay.
And even for the cremation route, we have to ask permission from the forest
Okay.
department.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Then within a few kilometers on the way, we saw a driver of a tourist group struggling to change the punctured wheel of his Toyota IS van.
जगह दामाजुंदा चाय पांच में चांद इधर काटी
तो एक एडवेंचर देखा हमने अभी
उसके भी होगा स्पेयर में आज हम BYD की स्पेयर
आप लोग घूमने आए हैं तो आप लोगों को तो रिस्क है ना
রাস্তা মাঝখানে যেও না একটু সাইডে দাঁড়াও
आप साइड में खड़े हो जाओ आप साइड में खड़े हो जाओ ट्रैफिक है ना
भैया जी
차로 배서 로미엔도 됐네
कर रहा है जी
मोटा को पिटा मत
Their guide is a lady, and she also stood helplessly watching him try and fix the wheel. He also had problem with the jack. Our driver Sangay and guide Sonam helped him, and within minutes they fixed the stepney. After we crossed Yutongla Pass, Sangay stopped the car. He and Sonam showed us rhododendron grown in abundance by the roadside. They also picked some flowers for us.
45 नहीं 46 है 46 डिफरेंट स्पीशीज होता है
अच्छा
हाँ और इसको रोडोडेंड्रन बोलते हैं सर।
ओके
लेकिन हमारा भूटान का नेशनल फ्लैग जो है फ्लावर जो है
हाँ
वो ब्लू पप्पी है सर।
अच्छा
हाँ
इसमें कलर एक ही आता है
हाँ कलर तो एक ही आता है
हाँ ओह ब्यूटीफुल ब्यूटीफुल बहुत खूब बहुत खूब
फूल को लेके आ गया ना
हाँ नहीं मैडम का दीजिए
ये तो
हाँ
आपका भी
हाँ, ये
थैंक यू
ये बोल-
थैंक यू दिस इज rhododendron rhododendron such a beautiful flower thank you Sangay bhai
Oh.
okay nice
Then we went ahead and crossed the Trongsa town. As we neared Pelela Pass, we saw a herd of yak on the road. From Pelela, we took a deviation towards the hidden valley of Phobjikha, followed the narrow road, and reached the Lawa Pass at 10,663 feet.